Hi, everyone.
So welcome to the weekly. Welcome to our AMA. Happy to be here with you. We're sitting in our living room, and we're only 4 minutes late. So hope that's not too bad. I think we're set up pretty well here. So I think everyone, if you guys hear us, if you don't hear us, just make a comment so that we know we're good. We can see the comments coming up here. I think we're fine. But so we have. I was telling some of you in the chat just before we went on, we collected about 35 questions from you guys before starting this. And I took them, I put them all into a Google Doc so I could organize them. And I did a word count. If I were to read all of those questions nonstop, that would take 30 minutes just by itself. So I'm going to try, to summarize them appropriately. They're organized, they're grouped. And I think we can get through probably all of your questions. And one of you asked, where do we put questions? So assuming you have new questions, so you put them in the chat, we'll do our best to see it and deal with it. But I'm expecting we're going to go for 2 hours.
Probably.
Even
when we say it's going to be an hour, it ends up being 2 hours.
They're usually 2. And I have to get up at some point to get a fresh coffee because I'm on dregs here, so you have to forgive me. Maybe that's during the remote viewing section when you're just doing your thing.
Maybe we can do it.
Because we have a bunch of those.
Right now you can put the questions in here, but we do have a place in the forum if you've checked that out yet for AMA questions. Something we were going to tell you guys about.
Right. Do you want to talk about the forum?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah.
So the forum is now live and open. We're so excited about it.
I'm going to show you a screen share.
Can you do that?
I've got to set up right here.
That's right. That's the great thing about this new StreamYard. We could never do this before.
So this is the forum. I'm going to just scroll a little bit. I've done this before. Sorry to interrupt you, by the way. I did interrupt you.
No, you didn't. So you did it in a weekly wrap, and it was great. But let's just do it again here.
Yeah. So if you haven't been here. From the main site, from Richard Olin members, there's a new tab there. I haven't screenshotted that, but there's this tab that just says forum. So all you do is click that. There's a very quick little splash page and just says here, click here to go to forum. And this is what you'll see. Welcome to the Richard Olin members forum. And all of the categories are right here.
Down the left-hand side.
And this place is blowing up. I mean, we have close to 250, just under 250 distinct contributors to this. And this is only members of this site. So this is not available to the general public. You have to be a member of Richard Olin members to be part of this forum. And seriously, this place is blowing up. It's amazing. So should I go into any of these? So for example,
can you show them where, for example, when you come in here, even I know a lot of people probably haven't even used forums before, but so we just want to show you a couple things to get by. Take your time and get to know it. All of the categories are down the left. The different categories are in the different color codes, but Richard's going to take you to,
how about this one?
Right here, Ask the Dolans.
This has to do with today's forum. So within here, there were where it is. I'm not
AMA
looking at the
questions.
Full. AMA questions. I think this is what we're looking at. So post your AMA questions. I think this is it.
Actually, I think.
Darn it!
Go back.
Let's go back. Sorry.
So the one because it's now closed, we had to close it off at a certain point. So that we could collect the questions that were there.
This is it, yes.
Right. So this is where this is the best place if you have a question ahead of time. Now, it doesn't mean you can't ask them live in the chat. You absolutely can. But we're trying to balance the two. So this is the place now that we are dedicating for people to go. And so
we'll create new ones for each AMA. That's all that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's it.
But just a couple things. So there's this, and then let's show them the back button. If you want to get back to the main area of the forum, there's two ways.
Up here.
One is right here.
This just takes you to the forum itself. That's like the home page of the forum.
And then there's also just a forum home on the top bar again.
Which is exactly the same.
Yeah, same thing.
It takes you to the same thing.
That's probably one of the most important things you need to know if you're, just getting used to forums.
And then here, this takes you to the main site, Richard Olin members, which we don't need to do that right now.
But just so people aren't confused, the member site is still running. Everything is going to be just as it was. The forum is an addition to what we have for the members. So
check out the rabbit hole. This is just complete whatever you feel like talking about. And people are just asking a bunch of questions. What are your thoughts on the Mandela effect? Water found for the first time on a potentially habitable planet. Von Braun and the UFO. It's pretty much everywhere you want to go. The Nazca mummies. There's a question in the AMA about that. Wilson document, who leaked it, and so forth. So it's just fascinating. Did you want to go to something else? Filing cabinet, or?
No, there was something else. It'll
come back to me. Here? Okay.
It'll come back to me.
So this is just something.
Can you just show them where a good starting point would be if they're not familiar with forums? Up on the right-hand side. Now, down the right-hand side, for those of you who don't already know, this is where all of the recent posts are. It works just like our members site. Down the right-hand side, recent posts.
Except for those that are pinned to the top.
Yeah.
So there's a few of those.
There's a welcome message,
which I need to update.
Yes. And then there's a practical guide to navigating the forum
right here.
So
do I need to click that? We can.
No, you don't need to click it, but we just want people to know that it's there.
Right.
Okay. So there's lots of interesting stuff in here to check out.
Look at this: wormholes and warp drives, best UFO footage, the smoking gun thread, cover up of the Atacama mummy by Gary Nolan Stanford. Good grief, that's going to be interesting. I haven't seen that one yet.
People used to put these amazing posts underneath of Richard's posts, or they would put it in the chat room. And this was born because people really wanted a place to archive what they were saying. And we wanted that too. So that's basically what it is. And we are just so grateful to the people who are helping us. It is just amazing. We've been away, so we haven't even fully engaged it, to be honest, yet.
No, you have to forgive us.
But we are looking forward to it so much. So,
well, I can't be happier about it, honestly. We've been talking this up for the longest time. I've been talking it up on so many weekly wraps and so many updates.
Yeah.
And people have been very patient, thinking, okay, anytime now, but it's been months and months. But all the work that's gone into it is now paying off for people who can participate. So, I think there's lots of activity, lots of engagement. And so we want to keep it that way. For me, out for our point of view, this is in fact, I'm going to just go into this question right here because it's actually relevant. Here we go. AMA questions. So I broke these down.
This one. Okay.
There's a couple of funny ones. So TZH writes, I would like Richard and Tracy to briefly answer how the hell they're going to keep tabs on this monster forum they've created. I've spent way too many hours on this already. I suppose if I don't respond to everything interesting, which is just about everything, I might have time to review it all. Is that the secret? And I'll just, this is from Mark H. He just says, will you be providing online services for the ever-growing Dolan addiction forum syndrome, DAFS?
I just want to say too, I mean, really, when we were trying to go at the forum, we were looking at sort of what we knew, which was a lot older. So the people who got involved really brought us into the most modern type of forum that's out there. We didn't even know existed. So we're very proud of what has been created here. It's
way more powerful, way more hyperlinked than I would have thought any forum would be. Like I think of the old 1990s forums above Top Secret or Avalon or some of the others, and they're not this. They are not anywhere close to this up to date.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to be careful. I've got the microphone here with my coffee, and I bet everyone's hearing that noise. I'm going to try to muffle this.
Mm-hmm. And we want to give a shout out to the moderators, because that is how it is. We can't possibly keep track of it, but the moderators have been absolutely amazing.
So our main goal, I can tell you right now, is it'll be as impossible for me or for Tracy to keep on top of this as anyone else. It's just too much in there. But my goal has always been, we've got great moderators, and for my part, and I'm sure for your part, we'll manage it. My only goal, to be perfectly honest, is that people are happy there, that it's a positive, productive, supportive environment that's got a lot of ideas flowing. And if that's happening, then I'm completely satisfied with it. And I will only make sure that there's no one abusing other people or abusing the forum in any way. And if that's the case, then we will deal with that. I can promise you I will be on top of that, and I'm not going to let that happen. So as long as everyone's playing nice in the sandbox, I'm just like, let's just go, have fun, and mix it up.
Right. Okay. You just reminded me of what I want to mention before. There is a place to introduce yourself in the forum.
Yeah, and many people have done that, I guess. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out. And there have been people who've been using it quite a bit. So I see Eric Amble's got a question, and I think that there are a lot of people in there who can help out and answer that for you.
What's that question? Forum looks great. I have a question. Is it possible to create
my own personalized,
specialized research archive where I collate stuff I found within my own tags or something? Oh.
And then Rob Dennis wrote below, yes, in bookmarks.
Oh, okay. Rob, thank you for that answer. Okay, so we'll figure that out. And maybe even that will be a post that we can create to guide people to do that.
So I just want to mention here too, when we end this broadcast, if anybody wants to go in the forum, the moderators will be there to for a short time to help out and help guide you. So that's something that we can all do. Right. We can make a trip into the forum right after this. So, all
right, can we dive into a couple of others? So this is another question about just personal plans, and it's not really a substantive issue, but it's a good question. I like it. Toe Cutter, there's a name. Toe Cutter asks,
yeah,
it's been a few years and much has transpired since. So I was wondering if Richard would redo the quote UFO cover up in 10 minutes video for a quick intro to newbies or non-enthusiasts. Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. And I should.
It's been asked many times, and we totally agree with that.
I did that video when my hair is still dark and when I was still working full-time in my downstairs office. And it was probably almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was edited, a little known fun fact, by Bryce Zabel.
Oh, wow.
Bryce had editing skills in iMovie that I didn't have at that time. And so I recorded it, and then he just took it and sliced it and diced it. But yeah, I could do a nicer one. So I think I will.
We actually, since we're in the members, we can talk about this, but we did try to do it about a year ago, and we were going to edit it in and edit it and chop it up, and we wanted to put imagery in it as well. And we found we were very limited by what we knew how to do.
Oh,
so
well, I can do something pretty good.
We can, but the reason why we stopped at that time was because we had decided we wanted it higher production values than we had were even able to do with some help from some people.
We've got so the thing is, there's a group that we've just connected with recently who do fantastic video editing. So we might work with them on something like that.
Yeah.
Or I could probably bank something out now that would be vastly better than what I did almost a decade ago. Mm-hmm. So either way.
Yeah.
All right. So good question. Let's move on. Oh, here's another question of personal plans and so forth. Richard, you once expressed interest in interviewing David Paulides. Still interested, or did something change your mind? Nothing changed our mind.
He went MIA.
Here's another little known fact. I actually did interview Paulides a couple of years ago on KGRA, and that video, as far as I can tell, is gone.
Yeah, nobody can find it.
It's not a video, it's just an audio interview, but I did it, I think, in 2015. Somehow KGRA had some kind of issue. A couple of those interviews that I did there are not there. And that was a great interview. I got more out of Paulides than I think anyone, and I'm not joking, got out of him. But I think we can do it again. He and I are fine. As far as I know, I think he's just been super busy.
Well, you guys were going back and forth for a while too, right?
Right.
Trying to work out a good time. I think he was releasing his new documentaries or something like that. He was super busy.
We'll come back.
But he was interested.
He's a very, very fascinating researcher. And we have a lot in common in terms of our methodology, the way we approach things, and also, I think, just our attitudes are very similar. So I'd like to do that. So that's on, hopefully. Here's a couple of questions on abductions. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So some of these names, like Brian Mercer, I guess Brian probably. I just watched Extraordinary The Seating. He liked it. he liked me in there, so that's always nice to know. I'm interested in to know what you and Tracy thought of it.
Can I just say, first of all, we watched it on New Year's Eve. We watched it a long time ago.
9 months ago.
Yeah. So when we were just looking at your question earlier, we were trying to, I mean, certain parts of it really stand out in our minds. Certain parts of it, I probably couldn't recall the whole story. But I do know that we had, to most of the movie, we had a positive reaction in that we thought these were good stories being told. And we had a little bit of an issue with some of the statements made at the very end.
Can I just say this?
Sure, if you want to.
Well, what I found,
because a lot of people haven't seen it yet. We don't want to really spoil things too much either. So
yeah, this is a good documentary. It's well put together. We're actually friends with one of the people involved, Laurie Wagner, is a very close friend of ours.
Producers.
And the other producers, John Sumple, Jack Roth, and there's one other gentleman, I keep forgetting his name. They're all good guys. The people that they had involved are good people. So it's basically two groups of people they interviewed. They had researchers like myself, Yvonne Smith, Barbara Lamb, Mark Antonio, Melinda Leslie, who's kind of a researcher and an experiencer. But then they had experiencers. And most of these people are not that well known. Some are kind of well known. Sarah Neblina is kind of well known. And of course, Niara Isley is pretty well known, and a few others. But then there's others who are not well known. I think they came across very well. I think for the most part, these experiences are quite believable. But
they do tell a compelling story.
They do. And, if you really want to be critical, you have to ask, did these people, like, what is the basis that you're going to believe these people are? Are they just subject to a kind of either fantasies or a lack of truth telling? And you really do have to ask yourself that. We're not going to do any details there, but there are a couple of statements that were made by at least one or two of these individuals that made me scratch my head a little bit. And I just wondered, how do you know this? How are you so sure? So there is a little bit of that. That's part of this phenomenon, and it makes it difficult to have 100% assurance on every bit of data that's coming your way. Would you agree?
Completely.
Yeah.
We're being kind of vague here, but we might want to give people some time to see it since it just came out.
Right.
And then we could talk about it a little bit more. Plus, I'd like to watch it again. One of the things, I was talking to Lori, the producer, one of the producers, and she said it's available on all video streaming platforms, but it's actually the most expensive on Amazon.
Oh, yes, right. So by like $4.
Yeah, for the first week, I think we should be hitting week 2 soon. I can't remember what the exact release date was, but for the first little while, they only let you purchase it for like 2 weeks, and it's more expensive on Amazon. And then after, when it becomes available to rent, it will be the same amount across the board on all platforms.
Okay, fine.
So I just don't know if we've hit that spot yet where we can rent it. So,
it should be soon.
Yeah.
Go to their website, just type in Extraordinary the Seating, and you'll probably go to the site, and I'm sure it'll guide you through.
Yeah.
And a question from Scott, which I didn't, I should have realized which Scott this was. But this is Richard. I'm interested in exploring regression, looking for a recommendation of someone in my area who might be able to assist me with that. So I believe this is the Scott, who's a very long time supporter, friend of mine who lives in Ohio.
It is.
Yeah. So here's what we suggested. Do you want to just put this one out there?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect thing for us to actually make a space for on the forum. Because, if it's something that you want to do locally, we really aren't going to be able to give that recommendation. But I think it would be a great idea for us to have a space for people who have pursued regression to post in their area their own recommendations, their own references. And people can, post their ideas about the people that are out there. I mean, Yvonne Smith and Barbara Lamb are still out there.
They're both out in California.
They are doing regressions, and they do them. If you get a hold of them early enough, they will do them at conferences. Yvonne was doing them when we were there.
Some might do them on Skype, maybe. I don't know if they do actually.
They might do it on Skype. I would definitely recommend doing it
In
personally.
person, absolutely.
But there are really good people in the areas. You just have to find someone who's open to this kind of thing. Or
this is a forum topic.
It is a perfect forum
because
topic.
It's hard for everyone to know, including for us to know, like who is doing this actively in Ohio or Indiana or New York or Arkansas or any other place. Like they're out there, but I think this would be something we should create a forum topic for.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So sorry not to take it any further than that, Scott, but I'm sure
we really don't know is the answer who else. But let's pool our resources.
So this one is a kind of standalone question, but I liked it. And it's by Gaspar74. Just wondering your thoughts on Steve Mera. If you guys don't know who Steve Mera is, that's M-E-R-A. He's out in the UK. Steve Mera is a very important and interesting researcher these days. What are your thoughts on Steve Mera's research into the paranormal and UFOs and his hypothesis, which seems to be shared by more these days, that they are one and the same? He seems to point out positive magnetic anomalies being areas where a lot of UFO sightings and paranormal things happen, and the idea that you have to take something out in order to put something in. I think he means a sort of evening out or balance of both dimensions, if that's where they're coming from. Fascinates me. However, it seems a bit of a stretch at the same time. I agree. I'll just do mine.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, we know Steve. I have a lot of respect for him. To me, he started out really as a ghost hunter type of researcher who got into UFOs.
Yeah, he was a paranormal researcher, yeah.
So that's his primary focus. He knows that really well.
Mm-hmm.
He's done that many, many times. He can tell you all about EVPs and his theory of dimensions and so forth. He's knowledgeable about UFOs too.
Mm-hmm.
So his theory is that there's a tremendous crossover between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I am personally not that convinced. So I think that I think that we're talking about a variety of phenomena that sometimes overlap, but sometimes are distinct. A sighting of a TR-3B is not going to be related to the stuff that he's talking about, it seems to me. Or the sighting of a perfect flying saucer over your car, which we heard about that from James Fox the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that related to Steve Mera's research into the paranormal? I mean, I'm inclined to think no. What do you think?
I think it's a very broad topic, and I think there's probably a huge variety of things going on. So for me, even when we were talking to Steve about this personally, I felt like, I wanted to get deeper into exactly what he was talking about. So he was talking a little bit about the positive magnetic anomalies, and we didn't see his lectures. So I don't want to pretend that I could really answer that.
We did see one, but I think
we saw one. Yeah. But I mean, he's got some really compelling stuff here, but I feel like I need to know it better to be able to describe it. I just think there's many things going on. I think it's important that we study what people are reporting. Remember you talked to Ryan Stacy? I always bring this up. And Ryan Stacy is someone who sort of tries to be very nuts and bolts in Canada. He's an investigator.
Yes.
And he's really moving to this place too, where we study what's happening. We don't sort of make this separation first.
This is a really good point.
Because, I mean, even if people are seeing a craft over a car, we still don't know, is this just happening in our reality? Is this interdimensional? We don't know. Is there some sort of...
Watch the one interview. I can't remember if it's the interview I did with Ryan Stacy that's public on YouTube or private for members only. In one of those, I think it's the one that's only for our site, he talks about a particular... No, it's in the public one, and then we talk about it again. There's a spot in Ontario, Canada.
Yeah.
He identifies it as this massive hotspot, like this everything site. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And he is, like you were saying, he's a very methodical, nuts and bolts, material-oriented researcher, but he's experiencing all of this bizarre weirdness at this particular location.
Yeah, and he's saying if we separate it, we're really missing something. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be looking at it overall without judging it and then trying to put the puzzle pieces together, which, I think is super valuable. And just one other thing I'm going to add to that, just out of interest, because some of I went to Ramtha a long time ago. It doesn't mean, I'm not a Ramtha student anymore, but I went and experimented with many different things and, took tidbits and of each thing. And just as an interesting point, this was a teaching way, way, way back about the dimensions. This idea of having to, there having to be this exchange. I've never known what to do with that information. I thought it was interesting at the time, and all of it I just keep in the back of my mind. But I just thought I'd throw it out there. I just find that kind of interesting. I've always been intrigued by that idea, but need to know more.
It's a good question. I guess we're saying we a little bit. We agree, and we're not sure. So we'll have to come back to it.
We should interview Steve.
Yeah, actually, that's a great idea. It's really the question of, are we talking, to what extent is this a physical, material only phenomenon, or to what extent is there a dimensional aspect to it? And there's a number of other questions that go into that place. So I think we'll be coming back to it.
But I think a paranormal investigator is someone who's really good to look at this, because they are, who's really serious, like Steve, because they're out there with equipment measuring things where things are happening. So yeah, I think he would be a great person to interview.
I feel that there's definite distinction. It's not all the same phenomenon. I think that there's overlap, and I think that there are definite areas where they don't overlap. Okay. How about some remote viewing questions?
Was that Gaspar's question? I think it was.
Yes, it was. Yes, indeed. That was your questions there. Glad everyone can hear us, by the way. Yeah. So there's a couple of really cool remote viewing questions. This is Barbara. She says, I do remote viewing in a crazy self-taught version. I love that. Does Tracy have any online classes of any kind? And here's some other ones. By the way, I'm going to put my fresh coffee on.
Okay.
Can you scroll through this? And I'm going to come right back while you do this.
Okay.
Coming right back.
So I don't, I'm sorry. I don't have any online classes. I'm interested in so many different things, to be honest. Remote viewing was one major component of my life. But I have been through many, many different modalities. And so it's never been something I've considered really, well, people have asked me to teach it, but I just haven't felt compelled to yet. But I will tell you that I have been paying very close attention lately to be able to know who to direct people to. And I think from what I'm hearing, one of the best people out there, one of the most acceptable, or sorry, I just got distracted for a second. Not acceptable. One of the best people out there, from what I'm hearing, is Lori Williams. Lori Williams is the protege of Lynn Buchanan, who was one of the Project Stargate remote viewers.
Does she have a website?
She does.
All right, well, just Google it. Just search it.
Put Lori Williams remote view, and she should come up. It's something, I think it's Intuitive Specialist or something like that. It's also available on irva.org, IRVA.org. I think under resources or links.
That might be a better place to start,
Yeah, well, that's always the place I recommend to start, irva.org. It's going to give you all the information to get going, but you'll find Lori Williams on there. And I think this is who I would currently recommend.
What do you think about this question? Do you want to read that, or shall I?
You want to read it?
Do you feel that
your coffee?
There's my coffee. Do you feel that your hooded being encounter is related to your remote viewing experience in some way? What do you feel about the possibility that this was a remote viewing attempt on you and or your friend from some being who had somehow registered your own remote viewing activity in that realm and popped in to check you out? We've wondered about this. At least I've wondered about it. I'm getting my coffee.
Yeah. Okay. So the way I have really, let me just start here. When I dug into remote viewing, I was in Vancouver, Canada. I got into it very deeply, as a lot of you know. I had experiences leading up to this, of a different sort. I would put them more roughly in a paranormal sort of category. What's interesting to me in the timeline is after really getting into remote viewing, this is when things began to change. This is when, later on the hooded being encounter happened, and my out of bodies, and just very unusual encounters that had a really different feel, that were more not as light. more serious feeling. Wait. Okay. So you have an interesting question I haven't really thought about before in that particular way. But basically, I think you're asking, in that moment, were they coming to check me out because of what I have been doing? And yeah, we've thought about it generally, that I think they might be looking at people who are sort of piercing this level of consciousness and going out there.
Can I put in my own?
Yeah, kind of. I don't want to say aggressively, but very actively practicing this. It's possible that it might get their attention and they might be looking in. I mean, I don't know, but it would seem to me that we would be some people of interest.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I thought we had talked about this. Maybe not. Long before.
Well, we had, just not. Yeah. Anyway,
I've had a theory for a long time, more than a decade. Because one thing I noticed, typical thing, someone would say, I began meditating, I began doing such and such spiritual practice, and then boom, I had this experience.
Yeah.
I got to tell you how many times that's come to me. So over the years, I thought, what is there a connection? Makes sense that there would be. If I were some super telepathic alien, seriously, or some other intelligence, and I'm observing these humans, and I notice that some have really stronger capabilities that enable their mind to reach my mind, I'm going to find them interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you have said that for a long time.
I'm not going to find ordinary humans who just live, staring at the ground, thinking about their daily routine. I'm not going to find them that interesting. But I will find those few humans interesting who are trying in some way and succeeding in some way to use their mind to reach me.
Well, yeah, like, are we piercing into their realm?
Yeah. So it's only a theory.
Well, no, I mean, it makes sense if we think of ourselves from their perspective. Humans are just doing their own thing down here, but all of a sudden, some of them are up here piercing into their realm, and we're not using language anymore. We're using, we are developing this symbolic language of communication. That's basically what we're doing with remote viewing. We're not using language. So, what if another civilization has transcended language? With telepathy, they're using more symbolic language. Now we're in their realm. So, yeah, I think that's a fascinating question. And maybe that has something to do with that hooded being encounter. I want to just say this too. Once I get a chance to get in there in the forum, I really want to open up the hooded being thing, because I want to know if people have had any other experiences like that. And I want you to come in. Oh, you can't post in. They can post under my post in Dolan's Diner, right?
Yeah, or they can just create one in any of the other forum topics.
Yeah, hooded beings is something I really want to pursue. I ask people about it all the time. And if they've had a story about it, I'm looking for certain markers if there's any different patterns of different hooded beings. So that's something I will be doing in the forum when I get a chance. But thanks for asking the question.
Now, I'm just going to point out to us and everyone else, we've been doing this 30 minutes and we've got a long way to go. So there's a bunch of other remote viewing questions. This is not a remote viewing question. This is an abduction question. I should have put this elsewhere. It's directed to you, but it's really for, I think, both of us.
Yep.
Kent, I think this is, writes. Kenticus writes about Dr. Carla Turner and has come away confused from watching the lectures. So she pioneered the discussion of military abductions, my labs, and she and her husband both apparently had experienced them. But there were a few other abductees who had similar experiences or claimed similar experiences. So to what extent, the question is to you, do you feel this is true or legitimate?
I would say Richard is way more of an expert on this and should answer this.
Well, the whole military abduction thing is, man, people still argue about it. I personally believe I wouldn't call them military abductions. I think that was a phrase from the early 90s when we weren't really understanding the true nature of some of these black budget operations. Are they truly military? Or are they military/private? Are they corporate even? But I think The larger issue is, are they human abductions done by some kind of breakaway civilization type of an operation? And to that, I think that there are some of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are some abductions that are done by that group. But I have to be the first one to say, the evidence for that is I don't think I could prove it in a court of law.
Right.
So it's just, you have a testimony. I mentioned Niara Isley a little while ago. She's one person who has I think she's credible, and she talks about this. And there's many, many other people as well. Melinda Leslie.
Yeah, Melinda's out there doing active research on this. By the way, when I did my lecture just at Congress, I presented a couple of
the International UFO Congress, not the United States Congress. I just want to say.
Right. Last week. I include a couple of my own stories, and one of those is the hooded beings and this other out-of-body experience that I had. And Melinda, and I haven't followed my labs or MILABs that closely, to be honest. I haven't. And but she came running up to me after and said, "I want you to fill out this questionnaire." So she just had this feeling, and so I don't know.
She did.
She did, right. Yeah. But I haven't actually gone through all of our stuff from the conference yet. So I don't know the markers that they're looking for, but there is ongoing research that I'm going to start paying more attention to, so I have a better idea.
Look at Domi just wrote here in the Tracy representing the woo with a flower of life mug.
Not quite, but close. Yeah, right.
That's pretty funny. So one more remote viewing question. And this is really a good one.
Okay.
Is this from Linda? I'm getting the names mixed up. I had to move everything around to put them in order. Just watched the YouTube video on remote viewing. That's our thing from yesterday. Interesting. Thank you. It's nowhere near what I thought it was. I think that's true with a lot of people who watched it. Her question: if you have no preconceived ideas about the subject, then is it possible to remote view something successfully on like 9/11, on which there's so much conflicting information already? Or then she said, having listened a bit more to the video, maybe that's not possible. But say you remote viewed CERN, like who the hell knows what's going on there, she writes, then it may be possible to get something, just as a question. So what do you think about that? I think we did talk about this.
We did.
Your thoughts?
And we just wanted to make sure that we understood the question first. We talked about this earlier.
So could you decide to remote view? Let's say you believe you don't have any preconceived ideas on 9/11.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say you just tell yourself, I want to remote view 9/11. Could you do it? Is it
possible?
Could you do it? Or on any other thing where you feel you don't really have a strong opinion about, could you do it? Or could someone do it?
Well, I mean, could you? You could. Of course you could. Could you rely on the information? So if it's something that maybe you've never followed it in the news, maybe you don't have any knowledge about it.
But this goes against what we were talking about all day yesterday. Yeah. You want to go in blind.
Well, this is what I'm saying. You could, but could you rely on the information? Probably not.
Well, you're not following the protocols.
That's right.
So the protocols would be like, I could give you a target that had to do with 9/11, maybe, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be the case?
But there's this other phenomenon I want to discuss that I didn't in the YouTube show. They have done some studies on this and found that something like 9/11, which has all of these different theories, is kind of an interesting one, because it is possible that you can remote view the main story.
Meaning what?
Meaning, if the dominant story that's out there is one of the dominant stories that is out there is the mainstream one that many of us don't believe, right?
Right.
But then let's say there's another mainstream, or not mainstream, but mainline story that's a main narrative that's becoming more popular. Is it possible, like, will remote viewers always get the truth, I guess is the question? Or is it possible that they will remote view the strongest, most dominant story?
The top cultural narrative.
Yes, thank you. And so, this is an interesting question.
Good grief.
They aren't able to fully answer. However, there is someone who did studies on this, and they made a target that was based on a false narrative, and the remote viewers came up with the false narrative. I'll have to look it up so I can give that a specific, I can name the study and I can name exactly what they did, but I'll tell you when I heard it, I can see how that could be true. So I really want to paint a realistic version of remote viewing. Like there are limitations and there are issues, and this is one of them. Front loading and knowing any information about it is generally not good. You generally don't want to do it because it is almost impossible to keep out your thoughts about it, right? So you generally don't want to know. And then there's this whole other thing when we're talking about who killed JFK, 9/11, this kind of thing. Again, it's very difficult to rely on the information, which again is why I always bring it back to you want teams to pool information.
What we're coming down to is remote viewing is a genuine phenomenon that doesn't have an easy explanation in our physics, but that doesn't mean it's actually always accurate.
That's right. Same with psychics. Same thing with psychics, right?
Yeah, it's not a magic bullet. It's cool, and it could be interesting but it's not a magic bullet.
Yeah, I would say the biggest difference of remote viewing with psychics is that there are these protocols designed to filter out the ego and the guessing a little bit more than with what psychics use. But it's a good question. We're thinking maybe we'll do a remote viewing AMA at some point.
Yeah. Last remote view, this just jumped in from Jim Crowell. He just said, I can't find anything in print about Ingo Swann. Thought about how to get hold of his material.
Actually, there is an effort right now. I think all of his papers in his library, in his home, were dedicated to, I can't remember where it was, but there is a website that's going up, and they are collecting and condensing
Ingo's papers,
all of Ingo's papers. Huh. There's a new book that just came out of his called Psychic Literacy. I bought it. I haven't had a chance to read it. But this is the beginning of this project.
Stephen E. writes here, Jim, Swann's books are available on Kindle, Amazon. So there's a lot there. It's worth searching. You could probably even find PDFs. Like, for example, Penetration, which is a very noteworthy book, and you want that in your Ingo Swann collection. As far as print copy, it's not available cheap. There's used copies that are ridiculously expensive.
Find that right now.
But I think if the e-version is available, that itself is worth buying a Kindle and just downloading it, frankly. And then you could always hunt down, there's PDF versions of these books out there. You can find them and download them to your computer. So they're out there. Tracy's doing a search right now on Ingo.
I'm trying to just find
with his famous little Tiparillo cigar.
That's not it.
Yeah.
But there is something coming out that is solely dedicated to him on the web. And if I can find it while Richard's answering the next one, I will. All right. I will.
Well, we have a whole array of questions. We'll
do the best we can.
Yeah, we're going to have to do this again soon. So these are a series of questions on secrecy, cover-up, disclosure, Wilson dogs, breakaway civilization, and I've got them grouped. So I'm going to be diving into most of these, it looks like. So Mark H. asks a couple of questions about secrecy, I guess I'll just say. And this is a good question. So I'm not going to get into all of these details, but I want to dive in. So he says, Richard, there are lots of loose threads being disclosed, leaked, or suggested, all leading to the supposition of that the deep state exists. It would seem that the narrative is being directed away from a government-controlled deep state toward a privatized controlled one, a privatized breakaway civilization. I'd be careful with the language here. The narrative. Whose narrative? Mine? A little bit. For the record, I have talked about privatization of secrecy for more than 10 years. So it's not new for me. In fact, in the UFO field, I might have been the first one to really start going down that road. I had lectures from probably 06, 07 at the latest where I was going into this privatization mode. Really, once I started going into missing money, because I've been talking with Catherine Austin Fitz about this for probably close to 15 years. So it's been very clear to me through her and a few other researchers that there's a privatized element to this. So, that's just reparaphrasing that. So then he has a couple of questions. One, are we talking about a secret society with a secret handshake? Or are we looking at something vastly more sophisticated and superior, perhaps even behind hidden portals or underground bases, with the bigot group, that is the group that's let into the classified world, acting as mediators? That's a great question. So how secret is this secret society? How remote is this breakaway civilization? I can't tell you how many times I've wondered this myself. Are they living in alternative 3 world on Mars where they're completely separate? Or are they embedded within our own infrastructure with the kind of secret handshake, as it were, that you're talking about? Or are they buried within the world of special access programs? So my best understanding at this point, after all these years, is that I don't believe that we have a separate alternative 3 world on Mars or even on the moon per se, far side of the moon. I will say, over enough years, I've had enough things come to me from good researchers who give credence to, we have a base on the far side of the moon. How active is that base? I don't know. But even by having a base on the far side of the moon presupposes technologies that are not out in the open. You have to have oxygen. You have to have energy. You have to have heat. You have to have food. So it presupposes an infrastructure that is not on board right now, officially. Black triangles, anyone? I think that's probably what we're dealing with. I actually think now it would be possible to have an underground base developed on the moon. We now know that there's enough water that might be actually gatherable in the form of ice to start an infrastructure. And then with Black Triangle back and forth, creating, bringing the supplies over. If it's easier to get to the moon than in the old Apollo methods, then I think we might have something going there. So I think that's a possibility. But I think the main action is here on Earth in the form of secret facilities. Some of them, I'm sure, are deep underground. Some of them, I'm sure, are simply parts of active military bases right now that are just off limits. And I think what we've got is I think the U.S. military provides most of the infrastructure. But as I was just talking about this with Kit Green a few weeks ago, and I'm coming back with him on this interview, by the way, his assessment is that the U.S. government and military provide the infrastructure and money, but that the real action is privatized. So it's a kind of a combination. It's not fully private in the sense that the U.S. government has nothing to do with it, but who's controlling it? And Green's opinion is that, by and large, powerful, wealthy private corporations are controlling this through the auspices of the U.S. military and industrial complex. So there's that. And I think that's probably best. I think that's probably right. And then he just asked, would you agree Catherine Austin Fitz has established the loss of billions? She actually says trillions within the U.S. budget. If any of this money has been used to fund such a civilization or society, then ultimately that society should be afforded the benefits of any technological gain. I'm not sure I'm getting that full question there. Would it not follow then, if this did not happen, social unrest or possibly worse could ensue? Therefore, could this breakaway civilization and the private sector narrative then just be misdirection for reasons of liability from within the government, perhaps the deep state? I think I'm following you. Essentially, the question is, are we pointing the finger toward a privatized group to take blame away from the government? Well, the only people who are talking about a privatized group are individual researchers like myself, like Catherine, now Kit Green, and other people. I'm not sure that any of this is coming from an official U.S. government narrative. So I don't see how that would work. One thing Catherine has pointed out, and I'll just leave it at this, she describes the global economy as open, not closed. And what she means by that, it's like, imagine you're in a house with heat in the middle of winter, and someone's got the window open. Someone's got the door open, and all that heat is going out of the house. That's what she means by open. So in other words, within our global financial system, there's money that she believes is siphoning out. Mm-hmm. It's going out. Mm-hmm. Where's it going? Well, she believes it's going to a type of breakaway civilization. Mm-hmm. And the question is that we all ask is, how advanced is this? And what are they doing? That's really the question. And we don't have that answer. We've got some pretty good ideas. I believe that it has something to do with the UFO phenomenon. I think that it has something to do with interacting and engaging that phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I think that's why some of like these black triangles are still classified, because part of what their mission is, A, they're working on principles that are very revolutionary, and B, they're doing things that have to be fully classified dealing with this phenomenon. So that's what I think. But how far it goes is really the question. I do think a lot of this is privatized at this point. Mm-hmm. We're at a situation where we're in the middle of think of like the transition of the world from feudalism to nation states, like in Europe about 500 years ago, where you have a situation where the fundamental structures of political and geopolitics were changing. And you could be an old little feudal baron somewhere and wailing against the new system. But you know what? The King of France is eventually going to subjugate you because there's nothing you can do about it. The world was changing. And similarly, right now, where we are very definitely in a world where nation states are now becoming subjugated, like it or not, by international money, transnational corporations, international finance. And so ask yourself, how many nations of the 200 or so sovereign nations that exist in this world right now, how many of them have genuine sovereignty, genuine control over their destiny? All right. So of that handful that are powerful, like the US, which is the biggest, does the US have sovereignty? Well, yeah, the US is going to have more sovereignty than, say, East Timor or Ghana, or even like Pakistan, which is much more powerful than those two nations. So it's a matter of degree as to how much leeway these nations have, or Russia or China, the other big guys on the block. But how much sovereignty is there really? And in a world where everything is now changing, so it's just becoming more and more global. So traditional notions of sovereignty are becoming worn away. And look, you know what? There's nothing we can do to stop this. This is a global trend. And 50 years from now, people are going to look back and they're just going to see like there was nothing to be done to stop it. Very likely. This is my opinion. It's a global mega trend. So toward that end, we're looking at who's got the secrets, governments or powerful private entities. Mm-hmm. Well, the world is moving toward a new form of feudalism, one in which a few major corporations are owning the rest of the world, and basically everyone else is going to be there to serve and to work for them, whether you like it or not. That, I personally believe, is where we're moving. Let me move on. Can I keep going here, or do you want to? Mm-hmm. So this one, man, this was one that annoyed the shit out of me. It's a good question, so I would just want to say that first. But I watched this video and I got really angry. I really got annoyed. So this is from Abe FX. Richard, did you happen to watch the YouTube video titled Lieutenant Tim McMillan, retired, on Special Access Programs, SAPS, The Black Vault Live, from July 23rd of this year? I hadn't. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Abe. Or Abe. Maybe it's Japanese, and I don't want to, maybe like the Prime Minister of Japan, Abe, but maybe you're Abe. Don't know. Anyway, He's right here. He says the video is worth watching, and it is worth watching. He says about 39 minutes in, McMillan is asked about the analysis of the Wilson notes. Spoiler, he is skeptical. He points out several inaccuracies, inconsistencies, and illogicalities, some of which I have wondered as well. Most important thing is, according to him, the deputy director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, I think he meant of the Joint Chiefs, but either way, doesn't have inherent access to an unacknowledged special access program that's not out of the component office of the DIA. That's true. Whereas the SAP in questions, the budget was apparently coming out of the Undersecretary of Defense Acquisitions and Technology, Austat. That's also true. I.e., it was an acquisitions and technology SAP. So the idea that Wilson would try to seek out such a SAP or get mad when denied access doesn't make sense, as he would know that he didn't have regulatory authority. This is true. In other words, let me just explain this better. And so actually this was used, this is one of the points that McMillan used with John Greenwald, who was interviewing him, as to why he didn't think this was a legitimate memo. And I think all of what you say is true, but that's a ridiculous reason to doubt this memo. Wilson, I talked about this with Kit Green. Kit Green said the same thing, which was, yeah, Wilson, in a sense, should have known. He had no authority. He should have known that in his position as Deputy Director of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs, he thought he had oversight over this special access program. But in fact, according to Green and everyone else, he didn't. And the notes point out that he didn't. But ask yourself, okay, is Wilson really going to just know all of this off the top of his head, that he doesn't have access? I seriously doubt it. That's asking a lot. McMillan is a lieutenant, all right, who's being interviewed here. He's a lieutenant. He's not a captain. He's not a major. He's not a colonel. He's not a general. He's not an admiral. And I'm not saying he's ignorant. He seems like a very intelligent man, but he's a lieutenant, retired lieutenant. And yes, he's obviously done some research. But ask yourself, like, Wilson gets into a position at the Joint Chiefs, and I'm sorry, but there is no way any of these guys off the top of their head is going to know exactly where their limits are. People don't, they don't always know this stuff. And Wilson gets in there. He's told about this. He had just gotten in, by the way. He was new into the Joint Chiefs. So that's another thing. So Greer briefs him in April of '97, along with Edgar Mitchell and Commander Will Miller, excuse me. And he looks into it, and he discovers that he's not allowed or he's not authorized to get in. But that's not an invalidation of the entire attempt. And by the way, I would point out, I mean, when I was listening to Greenwald interview McMillan, it was one long eye roll. I just thought they're talking about all of the wrong things here. And it was frustrating to me. I just thought, oh, God, guys, get this right. But, Wilson has always acknowledged that he had the meeting with Greer and Mitchell. Like, that happened. That's back in '97. There's no debate over that. Mitchell talked about it. Greer, of course, talked about it at great length. Wilson acknowledged it. The only thing Wilson's denying is that he never followed up and looked into the special access program, because he thought, he said to me back at the end of '06, when I found him on the phone, he said, I didn't believe in any of that stuff, and that's all poppycock. All right. But he acknowledged that he had the meeting, the setup meeting with Greer and the gang. So think about that. He corroborated that. And then you have, I pointed out there's a lot more evidence here. So Will Miller and Greer on YouTube. I don't have the link in front of me. Grant found this for me, Grant Cameron. And it's a very interesting interview. from a couple of years ago, so before all of this blew up. But Greer and Will Miller, who was also with them, with Mitchell and the gang, to talk with Wilson. Miller's a Navy commander, and he's talking with Greer a couple of years ago. It's on YouTube, about the 1997 meeting. And now, one thing Miller wouldn't do as a fellow Navy officer is to talk at length about his meeting after the meeting with Wilson. If you read the notes, Greer and Mitchell leave. Miller stays behind to talk to Wilson because they're two Navy guys. And this is in the notes. And Wilson's talking about it in the notes with Davis. On the YouTube video, Miller is talking with Greer about this. And he didn't say, yes, I spoke with Wilson for 2 hours after the meeting. Of course, he's not going to say that in a public interview. But he did acknowledge Wilson and his team were super interested in these UFOs and the fact that they were being hidden within a special access program. And he did acknowledge from one of Wilson's aides that they knew all about MJ-12 and all of this stuff. Go find the interview. It's out there. It's fascinating. You want to show me something here?
Yeah. Start with Rob right here.
Where is it? Oh, to be fair, McMillan was pushed by John Greenwald on opinion. He didn't really want to answer. Yes, that's a really good point, Rob. Thank you. McMillan is a retired police lieutenant. Oh, police lieutenant. So he's not even military. But that's John Greenwald, Richard B. and Bonnet. Yeah. John, look, I've known John for a long time, 16 years, and I will always like John Greenwald personally, and I will always respect him and what he's been doing over these years at the Black Vault. But no, I really think, one of these days I'll have it out publicly and talk with John in a very civil way, I'm sure, about this. But yeah, he's obsessed with debunking this document, and I don't know why. When he brought this up with McMillan, McMillan talked about Eric Davis initially because that's Davis's notes, and Greenwald laughed. And he said, yeah, I just think it's really funny that all this came out at this timing. You know, what Greenwald was implying is that the TTSA team leaked this, which is complete nonsense. Like, that's not true.
They were very upset about it. We know that.
We know for a fact TTS, like, Puthoff was not happy about this leaking. You know, Puthoff is very key in TTSA, and I've communicated with him in great detail. And I can tell you, he did not. This is a very unfortunate thing for him. They had nothing to do with this. Mm-hmm. Another thing McMillan brought out as a critique, he said, why do these people have this document for close to a year before releasing it? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you have any idea the hand-wringing that those people went through when they had this document? They didn't know what to do. These are not experienced researchers who got it. Mm-hmm. All right. It took almost a year, maybe more for all I know, before Grant Cameron got it. It was, I think, a year and a half, a long time. Edgar Mitchell died in January of 2017. Grant didn't see those documents, the Wilson document, until November 2018. We're talking a year and a half, full 18 months or more. So how does that work against them? That's a ridiculous. I mean, really, that's not an intelligent critique. That's not an intelligent critique. He should have known better. Like, that's not a reason to doubt it. People sit on these things because they didn't know what to do. It's really simple. They didn't know what to do. I don't understand these folks who think, oh yeah, you just release everything immediately when you get it. Like, the world doesn't work like that. If something, well, that document came to me in April of this year, and I sat on it for 2 months. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, it was a little different. I knew about that document since 2006. I didn't have any doubt that it was legit, but I have to honestly say, I didn't want to be the one to release it.
Yeah. Nobody did.
No one did, because honestly, a shit storm is going to develop around you when you do it. And I didn't want that. I wanted someone else to take that. Someone else did, but it wasn't widely discussed. But I then took the initiative. I said, once it's made it out to a select email group, that's the inevitability. So I thought, I'm going to take the bull by the horns and I'm going to do it. So it became more or less associated with me, but I wasn't actually the one who truly released it, but I did sort of radically expand people knowing about it. That's for sure. But I will say this, I made this decision, like if a certain amount of time had gone by and that document wasn't released, I would have released it. I would have been prepared to do it. Like, for example, I would have made sure it's out by now. This is September. Oh God, I'm losing track of time.
I'm like that all the time.
April. But I would have made sure, a reasonable amount of time, and then I would have released it. Yeah. Because I believe strongly that it needed to be out.
Okay, 2 thoughts. We see what you guys are writing. I just want to keep on track here a little bit. So Brian just wrote this about
McMillan. He's using his police investigative background, and he's had limited training in understanding special access program. Apparently, he's attended a course a bureaucrat might attend. So yeah, thank you for that, Brian.
Okay, and then Mark H's is funny and it's related.
In the new form, there's a question. What do you think?
Who do you think
leaked the wills and documents? What's your best guess, Richard? Will you be contributing?
That's funny.
Well, yes. I mean, I'm not.
Yes.
I've already contributed. Look, James Rigney is the second in line. James Rigney.
Mark's just jabbing.
Oh, yeah. I'm not mad. James Rigney is the second person in the chain of custody. He is respecting that person. Now, enough has come out about this person without the name that people are putting this together. It so happens that we got to see James Rigney in, where the hell were we? Or in Phoenix just this last week. And I was able to chat with him about this a bit some more. He's in the position of needing to protect the privacy of this individual, but we've said this many times. James has said this, and I think this is the fact that the individual who got those documents got them legally and above board from the home of Dr. Mitchell after Mitchell died. And I think it's fair to say he got them so that they would be preserved, because not everything was going to be preserved. All right. Mitchell had a lot of papers, and some of these papers were not necessarily going to see the light of day ever. They were going to possibly be destroyed. And I hope James is not upset with me for saying that. I think that's a fair thing for me to say at this point, since it's already been said. So that's what happened. Now, that individual is not necessarily a UFO guy, right? He's just someone who cares. So what's going to happen with these papers? I don't have a direct line in here. I don't know. I have encouraged the right people to try to consider doing everything they can to get these out in as effective a way as possible. I would like to see that. I think everyone knows I would like to see that.
Mm-hmm. So there are more.
Oh yeah, there's definitely more, but I don't know how much more, and I don't know what's the quality of what's remaining. I have to guess there's some good quality documents that remain. But that's a guess.
So I want to just finish up on this with Brian just said, by the way, McMillan came into all this of having had a UFO sighting football field size.
Oh, cool.
Interesting. Yeah. So then there's a new chain starting here, and then we'll go back here. So Joni was asking about, and a lot of people, this is such a popular question that comes up all the time about Greer. What do you think about Greer? And so people, there's a little discussion going on.
Let me deal with this. So I see some criticisms of Greer.
She thinks he's completely nuts. And then we have who wrote it? Greg wrote something really funny.
What? Where?
You're either dealing with an insane ideologue or BS artist. When you're told enjoying Star Wars is bad because it's about killing ETs.
Yeah. So let me just jump in here. Stephen Greer, I don't think this is something that I would be ashamed to say to his face. I think he's a very complex person. And he has definitely said things over the years that I take very strong issue with. There's no question about it. But there are times over his long career that he's been extremely relevant. I have to say this. I got to be fair. So one of the things he did in the late 90s is this. He made the rounds in DC. Like, this is absolute fact. He had to be in his bonnet back then, and he was doing everything possible to meet with power players in DC, anyone who would meet with him. And he was able to get this meeting with Admiral Thomas Wilson. Like, that's true. So, just because Greer may be complex, and just because Greer may be problematic, and just because some people really don't like him, and believe me, I ran into lots of people who don't like him, as well as people who support him. But just because of that doesn't mean every single thing he's done has to be thrown out. Like, you can't do that. The fact that he did the 2001 press conference, that's a real historical fact. And there are positive and negative things about that we could talk about as well. But he did it. The fact is, he actually did meet in 1994, I think, with the director of the CIA at the time, James Woolsey, and Woolsey's wife, Sue Woolsey, who's a power player in Washington, D.C., along with John Peterson of the Arlington Institute, and John Peterson's wife, who I cannot remember her name. These are powerful people. And Greer met with him in 1994 and talked about UFOs. Like, how that happened is a question to ask. But the fact is that Greer, particularly during the 90s, had enough mojo going on that he was able to make a lot of these things happen. And to me, that's significant. So, and the other thing I will say about Greer, early on, partly because of his meetings in Washington, I have to think, he was very much onto the privatization of these special access programs before any other UFO researcher that I'm aware of was talking about them. And he was right, I think. So there are things where he landed correctly on a lot of these issues. And one of the questions has to do with CE5s, by the way, so we'll come back to Greer. But that's the reality. Like, that's, I always feel it's very important for me in doing this research not to take an ideological position on any one person. I can't do it. And with Greer, it's very important that I not do that because, as I said, I think he's complex. We're all complex, but maybe some of us are more complex than others.
Yeah, right.
So here's Joni. But he thinks he can summon UFOs. So let's go into the CE5 thing.
Yeah, because it's true. So people are talking about that a little bit down
here. Thank you, Melissa. That's a nice statement there.
A lot of CE5 people, as Brian, think that a lot of the CE5 people that Grant Cameron is talking about say Greer is genuine onto something with CE5 activity. And we've met a lot of people like that as well who feel that is something important.
So can I just jump in with my opinion? And I want to hear you on this.
Please. I was going to
CE5s. I've tried, back in the earlier days of the Rochester UFO meetup, some of the groups, some of the people in the group try to do CE5s. And I went along on two of them. Cookie Stringfellow, who's our buddy, who's run the UFO meetup. She ran several of these, and she's a strong believer in the CE5. And they brought me along. I was on the fence. We went out to Lake Ontario. It was cold, stayed out long time. And I think, the people made a really genuine effort. And from my point of view, nothing happened. And I think I did it one other time and really nothing happened. At Contact in the Desert, you and I sat outside one of Greer's CE5s where he's got the microphone, and
it just was near where our little cottage was.
We didn't see anything, but that night people later said they saw something.
Yeah.
And this is what I hear a lot. Like, people will do these CE5s either with Greer or just using the protocols. And it is not unusual that you hear people say, wow, something amazing happened. I had a long conversation years ago with Dr. Joseph Birx, Joe Birx, who he's still around, and Joe's an interesting guy. He did a lot of CE5s with Greer back in the 90s. Joe Birx is a genuinely, he's a smart, knowledgeable guy. He's a strong believer in consciousness studies. And he said, look, he split off from Greer a long time ago. They had their own differences. And you see this frequently with people Greer works with. Like, he burns bridges constantly with everyone who's worked with him. However, Burks said to me, I have to say, like, there were times in the 90s where we did this and things happened. Mm-hmm. So when I hear this enough times, I don't have an easy way to dismiss it. Now, definitely true. Like a CE5 encounter it's so easy where you've got all of these suggestible people there and someone like Greer who really is into having power over them. Like he really is. Mm-hmm. Will make a suggestion. I see this, or or sometimes like I hear stories where someone sees it, but not everyone can see it. It's like, well, maybe you're not advanced enough to see it, or you're not spiritually evolved enough to see it. And I've heard stories like this, and you can easily see how that can be manipulated, used as a manipulation tool to get people to see things that aren't really there. And you got to know that has to happen. Right. Mm-hmm. That has to happen. Yeah. So there's a lot of BS in this. Mm-hmm. But is there a core? And if we thought like I was thinking earlier, we were talking about like your hooded being. Mm-hmm. Is it that your meditation got someone's attention? Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Which would be along the same lines, right?
Right. How is it impossible? Mm-hmm. So I guess for me personally, I'm at the point where I consider it as a legitimate possibility and maybe a slight probability that happens, so that the CE5 could be legit. I'm in touch with one researcher, you know who he is, but I don't want to mention his name, who is he's a great nuts and bolts researcher, but he's a young guy, really into CE5s. And Rob Dennis just mentioned his name, James Iandoli. True. I talk to James Iandoli quite a lot these days. I really like him. I have total respect for James. And James and he's got a YouTube site called Exposing the Phenomenon, I think it's called. And yeah, James is doing a lot of work right now trying to validate CE5s, and let him do it. I think he should try. I think it's so. This is why Greer is complex, because on the one hand you see that there's this attitude about ETs, and I'd like to know, like, does he really believe all ETs are actually good and benevolent? I mean, that's what the meme about him is. And he's always seeming to say that. And he certainly talked about this at the 2001 press conference. And it was just, for me, intellectually, that was a massive fail on his part to just go that way. Mm-hmm. But I would love to be able to get with him privately and talk off the record. If that ever happens,
I just don't know how we could ever pretend that we know everything, even when someone is supposedly read in, or how could we ever think that we know everything?
Exactly.
That's what it boils down to for me.
I just get so frustrated. I know you do too. Where these people, sometimes they'll write to us, sometimes they'll just talk to us in person, and they know everything.
They speak in absolutes. I know I say that all the time.
And
it is a bit disturbing, because you just think, look, we don't know. Let's just be as honest as we can. We don't know.
So let me just say here. So we've been doing this for an hour and 20 minutes. I think we should cut off at 2 hours anyway.
Okay.
Because YouTube may cut us off. But what we'll have to do, we are going to have to do a follow-up to this soon. Mm-hmm. We're gonna have to, because there'll be more questions that we haven't gotten to, and more will line up. And I just think maybe in a week or two we could just bang out another.
I think that'd be great. Anime. Well, things are going to slow down for us. We only have 2 things left.
Thank God.
Unless anything else comes up. Well, we have. We're going to Canada, so we have. We're going to be in Toronto on I think it's 21st, 22nd, which is when the storm Area 51 is. So I guess we're having a private link into that's been arranged in Toronto. I
want to do some Naruto running exercises to train people
for members,
so that if you're going to run to Area 51, you got to do the Naruto running properly. And I'm here to train people in that protocol. I believe we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're elevating yourself to sort of master level of.
I think so. Yeah. I think after like a couple of days of practice, I'm at the master level of Naruto running style. So even if you'll avoid the bullets this way. So don't want to forget that.
All right. I will make sure
It's important.
to record your demonstration.
Yeah, maybe something will happen to that recording so it never gets out.
I still have the other ones. A couple people here have seen
does.
them.
No, what? No.
Yeah, well, you know, when we go to our little private member groups, that might slip out every once in a while. I don't give it to anyone, but I might show it. So
you have to know.
Private viewings.
I think people probably can gather this by now, but like when we are just doing our own thing, I'm a little bit off the wall at times. Like, is this not true? Right?
No.
It's true.
We have fun.
It's true. We do have fun.
So anyhow, there's Toronto, and then there's the UFO cruise coming up. I don't know if any of you are going on the UFO cruise, but that'd be pretty cool.
That would be nice.
You are.
And is that our last thing?
That's October. So
and I think that's it.
That's
for the year.
We have little things attached to those things. Visits.
Do we?
Yeah, we do. But that's it. So it's going to be calming down. So anyhow, my point was we might be able to do this a little more often, which would be great. And I just want to take this moment. We'll repeat this again, but I just want to say
a couple of other statements here we should read too.
Well, you read those and you get caught up while I tell them something. Okay.
Yeah. No, you read. You go first.
I just thought of something else I want to address. So a big issue on the site has been notifications and getting notifications. Originally, we made the newsletter to try to help out with that, but that was only once a week, and people still want, notifications when things come up. So Evelyn tried to fix that for us, and she did the best she could, but it appears it's not really working anymore.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right. So we have someone who has come up with this wonderful idea, and we tested it right before we did this, and it looks like it's going to work. So you may be able to get email notifications. So we might be doing a little testing of this coming up in the next few days. It might be possible.
Great. Excellent.
So the first test was a pass, and I know everybody has been wanting this, and we just had no way to completely give you this without doing every single one manually, which would have been impossible.
We've come a pretty long way since we started this site.
We have. I mean,
honestly,
we're always seeing these ways that we could improve and, ways that we're falling a little bit short. But honestly, we have come so far.
You realize when we started this a year and a half ago, we knew nothing about running a website. Really. I had Richard Olin Press, but that wasn't an interactive site at all. This is a totally different animal. So we've come a long way. By the way, I just want to acknowledge Joni Berger wrote, Richard is so diplomatic, I'm envious, but I still think Greer is just way, way out there. And I just want to say thanks, Joni. One thing that I privately off camera, I'm not always diplomatic. So there's that. You have to keep in mind, Tracy can acknowledge that. But when I'm making any public statement, I absolutely have learned my words can easily be used against me. And so my rule always is to be truthful, but not to be personal. I don't want to get personal. So we had some Greer moments. Absolutely. Where I had to restrain me in public. And he was getting a little carried away. But in public. But what I said just now about Greer, I really agree with. I think he's a complicated person, and I would actually like to have the chance to have a quiet, non-recorded one-on-one with him, and I hope one day to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. I think it's possible now, particularly since the Wilson thing has blown up this year. He's connected to it. Yeah. I'm connected to it, and there's a way. And I think I know that when it first came out, that his initial thought was that I was somehow attacking him, and that turned out to be wrong. I wasn't attacking him, and I know that I think he was a bit relieved. And so we're not on the opposite side of that one. We're actually on the same side of that whole thing. So there is a way in for me to chat with him, and the fact is, I'd like to be able to understand certain things about where he's coming from, if he'll let me. I think he's someone who's got his guard up about a lot. But back to the whole diplomatic thing. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've had to learn. Knowing when I'm on a stage or anywhere, it's a huge thing to know that any single thing that I say is liable to exist for the rest of all time or the rest of my life. My words are being recorded. Yeah. And so over time, I have had to learn, I just can't throw things out there because I'm speaking in theory to the entire world, because something can be taken and someone can YouTube that and boom, there it is.
Yeah.
So it's always something that I have to be very sensitive about. And so
this is why if you are ever in the vicinity of one of the conferences and we do a members get together, not being recorded, that's when you can
I'm a little bit more
him.
But even there, like I've learned to be a bit more careful, but
no, you have.
But it's true. I've
really
learned some diplomacy. That's true. So let's do a little bit more here, and we'll go. How about we go for another 30 minutes?
Okay.
And wherever we are, we'll have to cut it.
Okay.
But anything we don't get to, I think we'll need to come back and do.
Okay. I just want to answer one thing.
Or I can do in a pre-recorded video and just upload.
Yeah, true.
That's also a possibility.
I just want to answer one really quickly because Mark S was asking about Dyatlov Pass, and I just want to tell you because someone asked me in an interview, a pre-interview at Congress, UFO Congress this past week as well. So I didn't finish reading and going into everything. And I'll tell you why. It's an endless pit. It's really the main reason. It's really, I thought I could go in, read several books, read the website, but it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, you can go in and you can read the translations of all of the autopsy reports. I was getting into all of it, all of the investigations. There are so many inconsistencies. I honestly had to start, I had journals open. I'm starting to keep track of who's who and who's saying what where. And there are so many inconsistencies. You have to, if you really want to do it, you have to dedicate yourself 100%. And I can't do that. So the deeper I got in, the more I could see, there are these 75 theories. All of them go out the window at one point or another. So I was following each one down.
75 is amazing.
That's right. And even though the investigation has been reopened this year, they're only looking at, natural causes. So that's really not helping us. So that's the reason. Do I really want to divert everything that we have here just for that and keep going down that path? Like everybody does, because as soon as you engage it, you really want to engage it. So I just want people to know this is why I decided to stop. I had to make the decision. Also,
I mean, we were starting to do some serious travel, like when summer came around.
Oh yeah, well,
it became just
there's that
possible.
There's that as well, and I just didn't know that it was going to be so all-consuming because it really is. It's fascinating, and basically for me, it's coming down to this is looking like a skinwalker type of thing. It's which we don't have answers for. So, I mean, I might engage it again, but it is a deep, deep pit that is so fascinating and so riveting.
Yeah.
You do want to drop everything and go right into it. But I am most interested right now in pursuing some of the hooded being stuff.
Right. So we're going to
we are already
solicit information.
Yes, we are already collecting stories from people, as I was saying before. But I just wanted to mention that because you're asking if I'm going to pick it up again. I'm not sure, so I'm not going to commit to that. I would love to, but it is a deep rabbit hole.
And I would jump into some other questions, but just to say, we have been talking about really wanting to do less travel in the future.
Yeah.
I'm really serious now because I said,
let's hold him to this.
2 days into the Phoenix event, I think I said to you, this was a 6-day event for us.
Yeah.
On the second day, I said, you know what I'd like to do right now? Tracy said, what? I said, fly home right now.
Well, yeah, usually
I just wanted to get home.
Either 2 days we travel on the ends.
I mean, it was nice, and I'm glad we did it because a lot of good things came out of it.
It was amazing.
We're going to upload, by the way, some video for you guys only, probably later today.
Yeah, just some funny little video snippets. I just took little snippets here and there.
A lot good came out of it.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I'm glad. But oh my God, it was exhausting. It was exhausting.
We were on from the second we walked out of the room as soon as we got ready and had breakfast, and we would get back into the room at 11:30 p.m. And I mean, it was full on the entire time. It was very difficult to make it from one spot to the other.
And I have to say, and this is not trying to brag, but you and I were probably more besieged by people than anyone else at that event. on a regular basis.
Yeah,
I
well-
actually think that's true.
Well, what was interesting was the numbers were actually down. They changed locations. They're doing it at a different time of year.
Yeah.
You know, a lot was different. So this is kind of a transition year. So their numbers were down a little bit.
Not for us.
But not for us. For us,
No.
it was
It's
nonstop.
It's very gratifying to know that people are interested in what we do. It wasn't just me. It was us.
Well, we were both lecturing, so
right.
It was,
a lot of people were interested in Tracy's stuff, your whole, everything you're doing. But the combined thing was like at our table, it was constant, like rows deep of people standing around. And wherever we were walking, we were being we actually couldn't walk from one. We couldn't walk probably 15 feet without people coming up to us at all times,
which was fine. It just.
But yes, like I say, it's nice to be loved, but it is just imagine like constantly having to answer questions again and again and again, and to engage. So it's exhausting. And by the end of each day, I would actually go back with you sometimes into the hotel room, and I would say, I need to lie down. And my head would hit the pillow immediately.
You would be out in 30 seconds because
I'd be asleep.
So exhausted.
And I would sleep for 30 minutes. And you'd wake me up.
We would have an interview pending. And so I would only be able to let him have so much time asleep, but he would go to sleep. I'd wake him up, give him a coffee, go down, have to be in an interview, and then people would stop him all along the way. So it was,
it's not like that it wasn't like that for any other person at that event. I can't believe. So we can't do that.
Just to help people understand. Yeah.
So, maybe, I don't know how many we can limit it to, but we've got to limit the travel. Because also I want to read the rest of 21st Century Mind. Now that we're set back up in the collab room, I want to get that whole thing set back up and finish reading that audiobook and get that thing done. And I think we'll be able to. Yeah,
we will. It's just, it is harder to get all of the research projects done. And as you know, we've fallen behind in some of the forum emails.
I see Michael Schuyler here, or Schuyler. I think I know you. If that's you, welcome. I recall you writing, 10 years ago or more, if I'm not mistaken. So if that's you, you can let me know, unless it's a different Michael Schuyler, because there's probably multiple Michael Schuylers in this world. But if that's you, I just want to let you know I recognize you and I'll welcome you to the site, because he is a gentleman who I believe has done a lot of UFO writing over the years. Okay, so you want to continue? We've got
I just want to, Joni asked, where's the Hooded Being story written? I actually haven't written it yet. We have an off the cuff about it.
A long conversation.
In Dolan's Diner. There's a place called Tracy's Take in the forum, and we have it there. We also have it on the main site, but the forum
it's linked from the forum.
It's a way to archive things, so it's in there.
Yeah.
But I will be getting into that more. I'm very interested in pursuing it, obviously. Personal reasons, and there are a lot of researchers actually interested in it as well now that we've been going around talking about it.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So we've got about 25 minutes, and there's no way that we're going to be able to get to all of this. But I think what I would like to do is, rather than do another live AMA, I want to follow up here. I'll do a recorded session to answer all of these questions, and just so we can finish this AMA session properly.
Yes. By the way, I just want to say hi to everybody who's there. Lots of people coming in saying hi. I just want to say hi back to everybody.
I'm not saying hi, so what do you think about that? So glad everyone's here. So Willie TRD Michael says thanks. Okay, good. Cool. So this Willie TRD writes, Richard talks about a breakaway civilization. Graham Hancock talks about a lost civilization that guided early man and provided him with tools and technology. Any chance that the breakaway civ broke away 20,000 years ago? Or are we sure it's a recent phenomenon? It's a good question. I think about this a lot. I don't know how confident Graham Hancock is about his thesis. I have my questions about it. Like, I don't know that I go back and forth. I've said for years, I think there's a big hole in our ancient history. I do believe this. A very significant side interest of mine that I don't usually talk about publicly, but sometimes, is human prehistory. So simply that means prior to the advent of writing, which, as far as anyone can tell, you've got ancient Sumer, roughly 6,000 years ago. We start getting little cuneiform, and that's the origins of writing. There are images that, carvings on bones prior to that. And there's different images that humans were obviously making, but it's not clear that that was in the form of any kind of formalized written language. There's evidence that we were noting the phases of the moon, 10,000, 15,000 years ago. There's actually no evidence of writing, though, that anyone has ever uncovered prior to Sumer. And I say this because if you're going to go back to the tools, is there lost civilization? This is really the question. And I ask myself this a lot. So from ancient Sumer to now is about 6,000 years, 5,000 to 6,000 years. So let's just say 5,000 years. So is there a 5,000 year gap in which you could theorize that an ancient civilization was created and crashed without anyone knowing, including writing, technology, and then down to zero? And also, is that likely? And I've wondered, I think that it's entirely possible that we've been watched for a long time. I also think it's possible. I look at something like the Great Pyramid at Giza, and I'll just flat out say this. I do not believe the official explanation of the Giza Pyramid. You're going to have to go, you're really going to have to convince me of this. I read a great book called The Great Pyramid at Giza by Richard Tompkins from early 70s. A brilliant, absolutely brilliant study. I've got it around here. And there's too much about that pyramid. It doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form that those ancient Egyptians did that pyramid with the engineering and the mathematics, as well as the geospatial positioning of that pyramid. By the way, all of this stuff doesn't make sense to me. So there's something there that's missing. So what is that? Is that a breakaway civilization? Well, yeah, I think probably. That would tell me that someone knew something that wasn't that doesn't make sense in the context of that civilization. So then the question is, and probably you could, maybe Göbekli Tepe will turn out to be a similar thing. That's even way earlier than the pyramids of Giza. How do you get Göbekli Tepe with a pre-agricultural society? Which, by the way, this is probably
we're saying Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, were they? So the thing about Göbekli Tepe, that doesn't make any sense, is by every conventional study of archaeologists and early prehistorians, right? They all say the same thing. It's that sedentary agriculture is what gets you population density.
Mm-hmm.
No one understands how you're going to have population density in a hunter-gatherer society because you don't get the large scale groups. So here you have Göbekli Tepe being dated pre-sedentary agriculture, or at the same time as we're getting the very beginnings of sedentary agriculture. It's almost contemporaneous. Right. But there's a lot of wiggle room here. We don't really have all the answers, but it sure as hell looks like those monumental, I don't say monumental, those structures are very likely earlier than true sedentary agriculture, which is a real problem historically. How do you explain this? These very significant undertakings. You get these large. So the current theory, by the way, we talked to Gordon White about this years ago.
I was just thinking
months ago. There's a smart guy. So Gordon White says that Göbekli Tepe was a ceremonial center. Mm-hmm. The cathedral was built before the city, I think is how he put it.
Yeah.
And so that it would be a case where hunter-gatherers, or they were maybe in a transition, hunter-gathering and some agriculture, that they would get together periodically at this site for worship. But it still begs the question, how the hell this thing was built. We have a lot of there's unanswered questions. And so going back to this question about, was there a breakaway civilization in some way where we were taught this? Like, I don't see that as impossible, but I guess we have to see it all comes down to evidence and logic. It's not illogical. It's not illogical to me that there would have been a group that came and did a little bit of intellectual colonization there.
Right.
You know, like Star Trek giving.
Excuse me.
Nice. That was a good one.
Sorry.
Just let it loose. Better out than in.
I'm like, I have the computer.
Better out than in. Okay, so.
Oh, God, sorry.
Now, one other thing I just want to say on this. Forget even what Graham Hancock's talking about. Let's look about secret societies in general. Read 2 books on this. Read Ruled by Secrecy by Jim Marrs, and read Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teachings of the Ages. That book is
just a quick read.
Yeah, it's a big, thick, fat book, but at least get into it and understand what he's doing. And here's why I say it, because both of these books, Marrs does a really nice job with this. And you could argue he connects more dots than you might connect, or even than I might connect. But it's a heck of a good read. And there's a lot there. And Jim Marrs basically starts out with the question. He writes this book 20 years ago. And he starts out by saying, well, look at our political system. And I think we can assume that the president of the United States is not really where it's all at. There's power behind the president. And he looks at the Bilderbergers, and he looks at the trilaterals and the Council on Foreign Relations, all of that. And he says, he makes the obvious case, this is not a tough case to make, that there's power behind the official structure. And his question is simple. How far back does it go? And so what he does is he walks you back through time, back through history, through the 19th century. The Cecil Rhodes and his council, and back further into the Skull and Bone Society, and back further through the Masons, and back further and further and further. And what he points out is that there have always seems to have been these secret societies that have had an emphasis on esoteric knowledge in one form or another, where they have their secret handshakes and they keep to themselves and they know things, and they've been powerful. And Jim Marrs in that study takes it all the way back to the dawn of human civilization. Now, I don't know if that's really truly defensible in every point, but it's not a bad case. Manly P. Hall does the exact same thing from an esoteric spiritual point of view. And I've said this many times, like, I don't understand how that guy could have written that book 100 years ago when he did, just about a century ago. He was in his late 20s when he finished it. Pre-internet. How he researched what he did. When I first encountered that book, I didn't know how young he was. I thought this man has to be 75 years old at the end of a long history of researching ancient societies. No, he was in his 20s. But be that as it may, what he points out too, similarly to what Jim Marrs argues, is that there has always seemed to have been these esoteric societies that guard knowledge for the initiates, for those who deserve, in their view. And the great unwashed don't deserve, because the information is too powerful. And so if you accept that, which I do, then you have to ask yourself, what do they know? How much do they know? How far did it go? And it's an interesting question to ask. Like for Hall, the whole point was these guys were about achieving immortality of the soul. That was their number one thing. And how do you do it? In other words, it wasn't a given that you would have an immortal soul, but they believed, this is the Eleusinian mysteries, according to Hall, that with the proper discipline and so forth, you could achieve it, but you had to work at it. It wasn't just there automatically. It's an interesting concept. So anyway, it makes me wonder, how far back does it go? Or does a breakaway civilization only go back to, say, technology like Tesla? And what's this here?
Meta Strange.
Hey, Meta Strange. You're struggling to fight, kill animals for food and figure out how to grow food. But then you also have time to, bless you, create a huge stone
Thank you,
complex.
everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, one thing I've talked about this before. It's a book that I loved. I ended up not liking this author, and I ended up really liking this author. James C. Scott, Against the Grain.
Oh, yeah.
We should start a thread on that book. Heck, I really recommend this book.
We did some off the cuffs on that a long time ago.
We did, because
actually.
I got really riveted by this guy. He teaches, I think he teaches at Yale. He's an academician. He's not one of us. He's in that world. And he's also one of them in the sense that he's like this typically argumentative academic scholar. You know, they all write in arguments. But the good and he also at first struck me as this total ivory tower guy, like basically saying, yeah, human civilization, sedentary agriculture probably was a bad idea. And I'm like, yeah, only an ivory tower academic could say that. Like the whole last 10,000 years was a mistake. That's where he starts. And then he makes his argument. And as you read this, you think, damn, this guy is he made, I thought, an outstanding, first of all, his research is great. And you could see he is one of the very, very most knowledgeable people on human prehistory. And you can accept his argument or not, but there's a lot there that's worth reading. And he strongly affected me for the remainder of the year. A lot of the things that he said have stayed with me, and I've actually incorporated into some of my lectures. But yeah, Against the Grain by James C. Scott, great book. All right, let's move on. So like one more question, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up. This is another secrecy question. There's a whole series of disclosure questions. I'm not going to get to these. The good ones too. And there's a whole series of questions on individual cases. One on the Holloman incident. I'll get to that. And Clyde Tombaugh, the astronomer. Pardon me, a little bit of gas here. The Nazca mummies. I'll have to do this in a separate interview video. I'm going to do all of this. And oh my God. Oh, Jim Mars's statement of zombie nation. Where did that come from? I'll get to all of that. I'll have to do that in a separate link up for you guys. And there's more. There's just tons more. But let me do this last one here relating to secrecy. Technomagnet writes, doesn't CERN, C-E-R-N, that's the, atom smashing group out in Europe, doesn't they qualify as a breakaway civilization? It's its own nation that no one can even get access to. And do we really know what's being done there? Is the collider down there just the tip of the iceberg, the LHC? And it's a really good question. Well, look, I mean, I conceive this idea of a breakaway civilization in a very specific way. I'm going to run by this again. I've done it many times, but it's always worth going over again, how I perceived it. You can perceive it differently. I don't own the idea. I just came up with the phrase. Over a decade ago, I was finishing volume 2 of UFOs in the National Security State. Hardest thing I ever wrote was that book. And as side reading, and I'm not kidding you, this is side reading, I read the condensed version of Arnold Toynbee's A Study of Civilizations. Toynbee, in case you don't know about him, was like the Mozart of historians. He was this natural, unbelievable genius of historians, and he was writing over a century ago. And what he was doing is what you could call meta history. That is, he wasn't doing detailed, deep dive historical analysis. He was doing the grand picture. And that's long since fallen out of favor among academic historians. They like to do the deep dive, the narrow focus. But you need people like Toynbee. And he was able to go deep, by the way. He wasn't just talking in generic terms. But what he did is he did a study of distinct human civilizations. Think about that. And what he actually did is he tried to quantify how many human civilizations have actually existed. You ever bother doing that? Toynbee bothered doing that. And he gave a list, and he gave a ranking in terms of the level of sophistication that they achieved.
Okay.
That's very politically incorrect to do these days, but it's actually a really worthwhile thing to try. because not all human civilizations achieve the same level of sophistication. Of course they don't. Like, why should we pretend that they're all the same? They're not all the same. And so he did this, and so he tried to do a typology of them. It's fascinating, and you can accept it or not. But the point is, I was in this frame of mind back then, 2007, 2008, where I was thinking about what is a civilization. At the same time, I was thinking about this deep UFO secrecy that existed, this deep world of special access programs that were impervious to outside analysis, outside study, and so forth. We're going to have to wrap this up in the next few minutes, so let me just say this. And so my thought was, is it possible that the world of secrecy, oh, and I was also thinking about the Cold War, that is US science, Soviet science, competing with each other in secrecy. You know, Soviet science had a really whacked out thing of relating to this guy named Lysenko, who was a biologist who had his own very, very long since discredited ideas on, I think, genetics and evolution. But he did it in line with Soviet ideology, and he dominated Soviet scientific thinking for the longest time. My point was, it was entirely possible for an entire society to go its own way, even in modern times, with its scientific ideas and concepts and so forth. And my question that had occurred to me is, could it be done in total secrecy? Is that possible? And I think it is totally possible. I think the world of special access programs combined with acquisition of UFO tech would require a deep level of secrecy, a deep level of off limits, legally and every other way off limits to the rest of the prying eyes, that if they had breakthroughs that we were not permitted to have, could, in a sense, cause them to go their own way with their own. And I thought, what is it that constitutes a civilization? There's a lot of things: social structure, social interaction, ideas, cosmology, technology, certainly. And I'm sure there's other things, but on all of those, could you consider those guys in that special access world a separate civilization? If they had knowledge of ET, special technology that we don't have that allows them to go off world and to do things that we can't do, they would be a secret civilization that's broken off from ours. So to ask about CERN, it's a legitimate question to ask, how isolated are they? Are they employing black world technology? They could very well be. Like, they could be certainly connected to that type of a civilization. So there's a lot of different ways, and you can get into it as I think I was talking with Catherine and maybe Joe Farrell about this a long time ago. But legally, is there a legal breakaway? Are the elites of our world creating their own separate legal structure that allows them to break away from the rest of us? Or what was that movie that we saw where they're all up in Elysium? There's all of these possibilities. So anyway, that's my thought about it. I think that
I think you could see it. You could imagine that.
Yeah,
you could imagine that happening.
I think it's going. I think we're moving in that direction.
Or
I think
having happened already. Yeah, it's not hard to see.
I honestly, I just have to say, I feel very pessimistic about a lot of things in our future. I think we like to think we have control over things, and I just don't think that we have a lot of control. I think we're riding down this current, and the current's taking us somewhere. The best we could do maybe is navigate a little bit, but that current's taking us somewhere. There's a lot more to say about this, but I think we're out of time.
It's a big topic.
Yeah,
it's a huge investigation, honestly, for all of us. But it's fun to think about, actually.
I see Kirsten Blackburn there. Just want to say hi to her.
Is. Hi, Kirsten. Well, everybody. I mean,
Mark. Well, we met Kirsten on the cruise, so yeah,
we did.
We would like to meet all of you guys. Like, hopefully, yes, all of you.
Hopefully, we will eventually.
This is a lot of fun. So, anything else here? Billy, what pisses me off the most is that, most importantly, these people with the team knowledge are automatically able to reach a level of enlightenment that we can't reach until we know as well. Yeah, they're in, we're not. George Carlin put it, there's a big club, you ain't in it, we're not in it. Maybe it's not that big a club.
There's a lot that we could talk about on that topic.
We actually started 4 minutes after the hour, so we have 5 minutes.
I just want to say,
let's wrap this up.
We're going to wrap this up, but I want to talk very, very quickly. Quick housekeeping. We talked about this a little while ago, but for people who just joined us or who are going to be watching this later, notifications. We are working on a new notification system.
I think people are saying that they're getting them.
And I think, well, it just started. I mean, we just tested it. So
okay, good.
We haven't actually, we sent out, we manually made an email for this AMA to do a reminder a couple hours before. But we're looking to have a system that's automatic, so we don't have to do it every time.
Good.
And so you might be seeing some, if you go into the forum, this is going to be linked through the forum if you've signed up for notifications somewhere in there. I don't know how it works yet, honestly, but we're going to be working through this in the next week. But it's looking good. And if you haven't already been in the forum, now is a great time to go in and check it out. Our moderators are going to be there and for a short time. And just go check out all the different categories. And on the right-hand side at the top, there's a welcome letter. And there's also some instructions. And you might just get a private message from one of the moderators welcoming you. So loved being here with everyone.
One other thing I just want to answer here, because I think this is a good way to wrap it up too. So Billy Athgate writes, and I could sense the frustration, man. Must be nice to know the truth, huh? Yeah. What I would say is this. No one knows all the truth. And no one in human history has ever known all the truth of anything. What we can do is our best. And that means we can live the best lives we can live. And actually, I think David wrote, take care, everyone. Don't forget to love each other. Yeah, that's something we can do. We can live a life of integrity to the best of our ability. We can live a life of honesty to the best of our ability. We can be the best that we can be. At the end of the day, that's what we've got. We've got the best world we can create. So I just feel like let's not lose sight of that. Let's make the best world we can create. There's no way, in my view, that we're just going to create some utopia where all the truth is out, where all justice applies. Like it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But someone did ask, and we didn't get to this. Do we have spiritual beliefs? And the answer is we do. Mm-hmm. Both of us. Yeah. I do, and you do. Mm-hmm. And we had something happen when my father died on December 2nd, 2018. The lights in this living room flashed intensely. I think the moment he died, 150 miles away. I can talk about that again.
Yeah, we can tell that story.
That's a freaky thing, and it absolutely happened right here in this room. My dad, who is a character, I love talking about him, and I miss him to this day. But the fact was, at his moment of death, as far as I can tell, the moment, 2 little ceiling lights in this room flashed. So what happened there? I actually do believe, this is only belief, I can't prove it, but I believe that when we shed this mortal coil of ours and we go behind the curtain, that there's something there. There's a place for our consciousness. So that everything here, this all matters. All of this matters. Everything we do matters. But it doesn't end here. So don't despair. Don't despair. Everything is difficult. Nothing is easy. And expect failure after failure after failure after failure, because that's life. Expect all the people around you, eventually they all die. Your body's going to break down one day. You're going to die. Every life ends the same way. But let's accept it. Let's live this life the best we can. And I think this is my faith. It's not my knowledge, because I can't pretend that I know. That's why it's faith. It's a little bit of hope, a little bit of belief. I have a faith that there's something beyond this and that this matters. So let's make it count.
Let's end on
that. What do you think about that? All right.
It was so great having you all here. I mean, all of you. It is so great having you all here. And thank you for being here with us. I know a lot of people will be watching it after the fact, but to the people who were actually able to make it, it was so fun having you here in the chat with us. It's like a family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sometime very soon. I think hopefully in the next few days. I or we can sit down. We can do the rest of those questions just on a pre-recorded video and upload, so we can do like the part 2 of this. I think that would be a nice thing.
I agree. And if you're looking for the form, just go on the member site and just along the top tabs, there's forum, and that will take you right in, and boom, you're there, and you can start looking around and maybe put in something about yourself, because we are building a community. This is for us to get to know each other. So, and our interests. Tell us about you.
I think we're going to do an end. Guys, it's been great.
So wonderful.
We'll catch you again soon.
Yeah.
Let's fight the good fight. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.